From Unity, Pride, and Culture, right now we're kind of give an update. We have several case studies that we're working on. And one thing we're finding out from Unity, Pride, and Culture, they're more focused on outcomes. After the research, we've been delving quite a bit into that. Anything that affects the Unity and Pride is really an outcome of public safety, outcome of parks and rec. So that's some of the things that we're really starting to realize, that our segment is a lot derivative from outcomes of cities implementing strategies on safety, transportation, strong neighborhoods. Integration with many other spoke teams is going to be important for us achieving what we want to do as far as Unity, Pride, and Culture. We continue to read, research studies, and books that our team members share with us each meeting. We meet every other week. So we've gotten a lot of positive information, reached out to some other communities with studies they've done, what trials and challenges they had during implementation, and how they measured their results, some of the things that we're looking at. We recently started brainstorming strategic objectives, which is, I think, our team was getting everyone's getting tired of research. They actually wanted to do something, put the pen to the paper. You can sit around and talk about this so often, but we got to start crafting words and statements for our strategic objectives. And I think we had a really good meeting, our last meeting, where we actually able to frame about 2 or 3. Got quite a bit of agreement. I know we have some of our team members here. So I think that really kind of gave us a little more, energized us a little more as a group, that we're actually getting something down on paper. We can actually show this is some of the work that we're doing, that's not all just not that research is boring or anything, or reading books, but actually talking about what we're going to do to get to where we want to go. So that worked out really well. And Mary Beth is here. She worked a lot on our network map, which we continue to grow that. And it'll be interesting to see what we get from everyone else's network map, to see where we have overlap or where we don't, to make sure we engage all the areas that we really need to be successful. We really are looking at some of our successes. The core of the team members are consistently engaged in attending team meetings. We roughly have about 6 to 7 on a regular basis. Our last meeting, we had 13. We already have 13 signed up for next week. One thing we found out through our discussions, some of it's pretty open and frank, is that we really need to get to know each other for us to work together as a cohesive team. That's kind of some of the underlying things, like in the fire service. We're all team-oriented. We never do anything by ourselves. So our meeting next Monday, we're going to tell stories. Every individual is going around the room and tell a story how what Unity, Pride, and Culture impacts their life, so we can kind of get that connection on a personal basis. And I think that's really going to help an understanding for everyone to know where they're coming from, what their background was, what they're looking to get out of this, and what they have to contribute. So we're really looking forward to that. Really focusing on key elements of strategic planning process that are most relevant to our impact statement. We're not trying to apply every action that's listed, so we're really trying to stay focused and not get too watered down as our direction. Some of our opportunities and challenges: integration with other spoke teams to make sure we don't overlap or have redundancy. And I'm sure a lot of the other teams are having that, where, well, this might be in that team or this might be in that one. So I think this getting together today kind of outlining where we're heading, and identify some of those redundancies, and make sure we're not duplicating work, because for them to donate their time is a big commitment from everyone. The one thing that we really struggle with, and we discuss at every single meeting, is making sure parts of our community aren't overlooked. And basically in every meeting we find, or someone brings together through a story or interaction, that, well, what about this group? And I think that's one thing that we're really struggling, because we're concerned about getting too far, moving too fast, is that we leave someone behind. We want to make sure we reach out to all the groups to make sure they're engaged, and that we have the right groups to go talk to once we get our strategic objectives done, and then get their feedback. So I know that's one thing that everyone in our group is concerned about, that we're not leaving anybody behind. I'm sure that's a common thread for everybody. Well, like I said, we're staying on track, and the biggest thing for us was actually getting strategic objectives written down. Really kind of got everyone, okay, now we got something, we can see it, we visualize it, we can craft that, we can change it, tweak, are, is, and all those other words once you get in strategic planning, but at least we have a framework to start going from there. So.
I'm Spitty Todd. I'm the one of the co-leads for the Economy and Jobs team. My other co-lead, Jared Funderburg, couldn't be here today, but I have my very able analyst who's been doing a lot of keeping us on track with us as well. And then from our team, we've got Mike Chalky in here. I don't know that I see anybody else on the team. Okay, so just quickly to tell you the activity so far, obviously we've finished up with the structure and organization, so the charter and network are completed. We did something slightly different on the network map. We didn't necessarily put it into the groupings of who are the implementers and who are the doers, etc., primarily because we felt like that was a little shaky ground. So we've just got a list of who, in the agencies, who are the people associated with it. And then the other thing we've done is every one of our network contacts, we have a person on our team that's the liaison to that person, so that really helps keeping that going. So I go talk to the couple of people that are on my that I am the liaison for, and obviously the rest of the group does the same thing. So we jumped into the assessment stage, and we started to look at strategy reports that are out there on economy and jobs. And this is one of those areas where there's absolute plethora of different reports out there. We chose to look at about a half dozen of them. Each one of those is sort of dry reading for somebody who's not really involved with economy and jobs. But each one of these is really long. So one thing we chose to do was split it up amongst the group, saying, you read this one, you read this one. And then we got together, looked at a matrix that was already created by the city of Rockford that related all of those. So that really helped us. And we've gone through and done a red, yellow, green approach to all those strategies to say what's happened so far in the community after the strategy was set, what's not happened at all or not even started in the community, and what's kind of started but not taken too much root. Then the next step we've taken is we took our impact statement and split it into 4 themes that we have in that impact statement, because they're 4 they're related obviously, but they're not exactly the same. So there's a skilled workforce part, there's a family impact of growth, so how much employment there is, what the per capita income there is, etc. Idea hub and reputation for innovation, and a recognized subject matter leadership in 3 key areas is the third area, and then growing and attracting businesses. So we split our impact statement, which goes into 2 paragraphs, into these 4 themes. And now we're using sub-themes to work on each one of those sub-themes per se. And in doing that, what we've found really, really handy is the statements that we have, is all the charts that we have giving us the building blocks in that pyramid. So it really helped to put down on paper all the stuff that we've been talking about for quite a while. And so really to use that structure was really, really handy. So we've got, I mean, you're all familiar with this one. So basically we're trying to do the bottom 2 layers of the pyramid. So the background information, I hope you understand what I'm saying when I say pyramid. It's the structure, really. So trying to put those down really helped us make those connections. And it really flows really smoothly, and you really get up to that top of the pyramid really quickly if you've had a lot of discussion. So we've been using that quite a bit. Our sub-team used that and drove it all the way up to several strategy statements only from our sub-team. Then there are strategy statements from a sub-team that Mike's working on as well. Obviously, these aren't baked, and these aren't the strategy statements we'd have, but I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that the structure is really handy to make that happen. Any other comments on that structure, Mike?
I can echo what Spitty has said, that the process of working through the pyramid has been very valuable in terms of kind of focusing the thought process. One of the challenges, certainly within, I'm sure shared across all the groups, but certainly within the economy and jobs spoke, is going to be the potential number of strategies that ultimately could end up in a final recommendation. I mean, we've just, Spitty noted that we'd broken it up into 4 themes. Well, actually, within each of those themes, we probably have at least 3 sub-themes. So a total of at least 12. I think we came up with 14 specifically defined thrusts for investigation. at the end of the day, obviously, we're going to have to whittle those down because we can't present 40 or 60 strategic recommendations. I guess we could, but I'm not sure that's the objective of the exercise. One piece of feedback that would be valuable, I think, would be to help get a sense of perhaps what might be an appropriate number. I know at one point in the materials, the number 7 is listed, but certainly in our case of economy and jobs, 7 strategies, we're not going to get it down to 7. So maybe as we go forward, if anybody has some thoughts about where they think a good target might be, I'd be open to hearing them.
Right, just quickly, the challenges, I think you spoke already, Derek, about the challenges with other spoke teams. In terms of our spoke team, it has to do with really connecting with the education spoke, primarily because there's a lot of workforce development comes out of that spoke, and then the transportation or infrastructure spoke, because that's really important for our economy. The other challenge we face is the core team is really quite small. I've got a pretty large team, but the core that shows up every time at every meeting is really pretty small, and I'm hoping to hear of how other people are getting their teams to come to these meetings. And then the last challenge is really what is transformational in terms of strategies, and that's going to be a hard one to come up with.
I think we, like a lot of the committees, went through a lot of initial growing pains. You know, some of our struggles early on dealt with really trying to define what our task was and how we got to our objective. We spent a good deal of time talking about that, and in that process, we got to know one another. We got to know one another really, really well, and we got to be comfortable with one another, and we were and continue to be very frank with one another, which has fostered some very, very good conversations. So while we started with a little bit of, I'd say, I'm struggling for the right word. I don't struggle for the right word very often, but I want to be delicate about this. While we struggled to find the right direction, I think we've hit our stride, and we spent a good deal of time looking at data, digesting data. Fortunately for us, there's a wealth of information out there regarding county health. The Rockford Health Alliance was very helpful, or Health Council rather, and the county health rankings were very helpful for us to take a look at, and talk about. And so following our review of that data, our committee split up into subgroups, and those subgroups were tasked with different objectives and came back and reported to the full committee. And following that, more discussion, and now we're at that point in our process where we are connecting with the members of our network MAC. We're hearing from those members during our regular meetings. We have a meeting every other week, a regular meeting on Wednesday evenings that's open to the public at the Rockford Park District headquarters. They are very well attended by a core group of people who are sincerely committed to the process, and that's been very good for us. It's kind of the right size. We're about 6 or 7 people who are in that core, which has been good, and it's led to a lot of productive discussions. So we're in the early stages now of hearing from our network MAC representatives and formulating, what will ultimately be our strategic objectives. But we've narrowed down what we initially thought to be a very, very difficult and cumbersome topic, how to help people lead healthier lives. I'll note that one of the things we struggled with, and I heard Derek mention in his speech, and Smitty, you may have as well, I think everyone is probably struggling with it, and that's the overlap, the potential mission creep. Where does your spoke intersect with the other spokes? You end up with this big Venn diagram of all these overlapping circles, and so we have been mindful throughout the process to think about that. To think about where those overlaps may take place, and hopefully, we'll be able to address those as we move forward and start to formulate strategies. But overall, I feel like we've come along pretty well, and I just hope we continue to move forward with these regular meetings and the thoughtful dialogue that we've had. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would say that one of the things that we've honed in on and we're kind of focusing on now, just in case anyone is interested and would like to do any research on their own, are blue zones. And I won't talk at length about blue zones, but if you get bored at night, Google that term and do a little reading. It's fantastic stuff. Like a lot of spokes, we don't intend to reinvent the wheel. We're looking at best practices, and blue zones, the concept involve some best practices that I think this community could learn a lot from. Any questions?
Can you elaborate, if you just did, on talking like more about blue zone? I've never heard of it.
So blue zones, and at any point, Roger, if I get it wrong, you jump right in. Roger Greenlaw is our resident blue zone expert. His career was centered on lifestyle medicine, and he can certainly talk about it in greater detail and depth than I can. But blue zones are areas of the world where the population lives longer. The specific statistic I don't recall, but it's something, isn't it, Roger? More people reaching the age of 100 than any other area. And these areas are across the world. We're talking about Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California. They're all over the world. And what I found is sort of as an exercise fanatic, you know, that's kind of what my default was. You gotta be fit. You gotta exercise. You gotta worry about what you put in your body. And to a certain extent, that's true, of course. But these blue zones kind of debunk that myth, because these are areas that don't look like Boulder, Colorado, or San Diego, California, where everybody is a fitness enthusiast. These are places where the healthy choice is the easy choice. It's the choice by default. It's ingrained in the culture. And people live longer, they're happier, they're healthier because healthy diets, exercise, emotional connections, low stress, those four pillars kind of they make the formation or the foundation of a healthy lifestyle. And these are areas where those things are accessible. They are the default choice rather than the difficult choice. And so that's the struggle, is how do you make those choices the easy choice? Because that's ultimately what you have to do.
My name is Catherine Pierce, Leadership in Youth, and Paul Von Driskin is my co-lead. He is unfortunately in China, so he's not able to be here. In terms of our work, we've got a lot of energy around leadership in youth, particularly the youth component of the leadership, and that tends to be where we get a little stuck, is the members of our committee have a great deal of passion around youth. So we have to continue to guide them into looking at current leaders and future leaders as well. In terms of our team dynamics, we had a great deal of energy around the storming and norming, and at one point we seemed to be in the norming phase and starting to performing, and then we had some new membership. We had some members that did not attend, so we kind of continue to be in that cycle of storming and norming. Hopefully at the end of the month we're going to be meeting weekly, and I think that'll get more energy around people getting committed and then into our performing mode. In terms of our charter, we have our charter broken down into 4 axes, and I'll share what we've done with that to try and maintain more of a focus with our members. Our charter is looking at the leadership culture. The culture is really critical in terms of leadership. Developing a long-term leadership relationship within the region. Not only leadership, but how do we define that leadership, and who is a leader. The leadership development is the second axis of existing leaders in our community and enabling them to be supported, respected, effective, and visionary. And then looking at the development, active and intentional development of a wide range scope of candidates to be future leaders. And then engaging our youth, and that is so broad in terms of how can we impact our youth and those that impact youth, so that we have a leadership development that is very, very impactful and ongoing. What we've been, and I failed to mention, Cindy Gustafson is our analyst for our team. She's present here, and Cindy's done a great deal of work in looking at researching what is out there in terms of strong communities, strong neighborhoods, who have been very, very impactful and has had a strategic plan that has been very sustainable. And bringing that information back to us. There's a great deal of community work that has been done out there, and looking at reviewing all of that literature and trying to identify and replicate what is cities that are like the Rockford region, and how then can we replicate the work that they're doing. So going through all that information is tedious and does take a lot of work of evaluating that and determining, can that be something that then we can transfer within our region. In terms of another thing that we're doing is looking at what is our ultimate goal in terms of the outcome, and identifying strategy statements, a strategic plan that affects that outcome, and then working back to, we have the ideal state, and then working back to how do we get to that. It seems to be our team can see the vision, they can see what we want. It's how do we get to that. So creating that plan and working backwards, I think will create a great deal more energy with our team, but also cause them then to evaluate what is really necessary to get to that end result. And some of our challenges, let's see, what do I have here? Collaboration with other teams. I think that we need to make some, schedule some meetings where education team, wellness, healthy lifestyles, because the leadership and youth, there's an overlap there, particularly with the education, making sure that we're not doing any duplication of work, or we're creating initiatives that may actually be opposing to what other teams have identified. The emotional mental wellness is another area that we're looking at as well. I think another challenge for us is looking regionally. We tend to kind of look more at the Rockford area, and we have to realize that our region is much bigger than Rockford, so including individuals from in the region that can impact our focus as well. And then diversity. I mean, if you look in this room, there's not much diversity, and we're finding that for ourselves as well. How do we engage diverse groups to become more involved and let them have a voice as well? One of the things that we have had discussion around is having a community conversation on the West Side, pulling in some key leaders from the West Side to engage the community so that we can hear what their concerns are and get them engaged as well.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jim Paragus, and I'm one of the co-leads of the Safety Spoke. To my left, to your right, is Jennifer Cacciapaglia, who is our newly minted co-lead of the Safety Spoke. We had the event happen during the course of our initial work where my co-lead had to step out, so we spent a little bit of time replacing her, and so pleased that Jennifer has agreed to step into that role and serve as co-lead. Jennifer had been working with the Safety Spoke already, so we were able to just move her in not as a new face, but as a familiar face to the group. We do have a large group. There was about 24 members of the Safety Spoke coming from all different disciplines: government, non-government, for-profit, not-for-profit. Some people who are board members, like Jennifer is, of one of our constituent groups. Other people who are, who do this as part of their job. One of our team members, John McGee, is sitting back there from the Rockford Fire Department, and we appreciate his involvement. We have been meeting every other week, every other Tuesday night. It's not a little bit like Healthy Lifestyles. It took us a little while to get organized and get started. We had our last meeting last Tuesday night, and I thought it was a very energizing meeting. We really started to, I think, hit our strides. We have broken into 3 subgroups, and so we have 3 subgroups, one focusing on data collection, and that's where our analysts are hanging out, and they are meeting more often than every 2 weeks, and they are collecting data from various groups, and I'll come back to the data collection piece in a minute. We also have a best practices subgroup, and then thirdly, we have a community outreach group. And we've asked people to volunteer. Some people have volunteered for more than one group, and some people have volunteered for just one of the subgroups. What we have set up as a structure is that when we meet every other Tuesday night, we meet for a 2-hour block of time, and then we're spending an hour as a group, as the entire group meeting, and then we're going to break into the subgroups. And we meet at my office, and so we have all these nice little conference rooms where people can go split up, and we're down to that discipline already where people know what times they're supposed to be there and working on it, and so it seems to be comfortable for everyone. On the issue of data, that's been one of our, there's a lot of data out there on safety, and primarily dealing with crime. And so we are collecting that information, trying to identify the best, most reliable resources. One of the we've had opportunities that have been presented to us to have speakers. So we've spent the initial focus of our time together has been collecting information on where we currently are when it comes to our status vis-a-vis crime. So we had one presentation, one meeting was by the Rockford Police Department. We then had, at the following meeting, we had a presentation by the Winnebago County Criminal Justice System. We had Judge McGraw come and address the group, along with the analysts that are on the county's staff. So we've been collecting information from them as to what data is available. Most recently, there was a presentation that some of you may have heard about by the United States Department of Justice that made a presentation here locally last Tuesday, which just, it ended an hour before our spoke meeting. And there were some people who said, well, why don't we just take their study and call it a day, and take their recommendations and say our work is done. And after some spirited debate, we agreed that that was not what we wanted to do. Number one, that assumed that the Department of Justice was covering everything that we thought was important when it comes to safety, and I think the consensus was that they had not. And we wanted to make sure that we were looking at our own sources for data as well. So we are moving forward, trying to identify the best sources, not only for comparable cities with comparable crime statistics, but also looking for best practices and what we can learn from them. And that's where we are emphasizing our activities in the next month. When it comes to the issue of challenges, I think it's actually kind of consoling to hear some of the same comments, because we're having some of the same challenges that many of the prior speakers have identified. The consistency of participation is a big problem. We have a loyal core of people who show up every meeting, and then we have people who string in and string out, and we don't see them all the time. And so, any suggestions people have on that as to how we encourage that kind of consistent cooperation would be appreciated. Integration with the other spokes. I think we really, as a safety spoke, realize that we probably pretty much touch all of you. Healthy lifestyles in particular. People aren't going to want to go out and exercise if they don't feel safe out on the streets. And education, and all. We can probably come up with a similar argument for every other spoke as to how we interact. So I don't have any magic ideas on how that would look, but frankly, it probably makes some sense, at least if to meet in a smaller group, and maybe we start out with our segment. And meet as a segment first, and then branch out from there and identify how the best practices would be for us to work together, because there's going to be a heck of a lot of overlap when it comes to our activities. So I've hogged the microphone enough. Jennifer?
I would just add that we do have the challenge that a couple of other people have mentioned with the sporadic attendance, but the core group of people that are attending are very productive. They're very committed, and we're getting a lot of work done with the group that we do have coming to on a consistent basis, so that's very promising.
Hi, my name is Ann Hammes, and I'm the co-lead for the Education Spoke. My other co is Jean Harzlak, and Lynn McConville is here from our Spoke. Is anybody else here from Education? Oh, and Mike is there in the back. Okay, thank you, Mike. And we were so glad to have Mike join us. Mike is a retired teacher, and to your comment about having a key group that wasn't participating, that was one of our challenges. And so we're glad that we have a retired teacher, anyway, that is on the team. So that brings a little more credibility to us, and I don't want to say too much more, but that was very good that that Mike joined the team. So thanks, Mike, because I did the same thing as you did, Jim. Reached out numerous times. So anyway, we have spent a lot of time on the SWOT analysis, probably too much time. I think we got down into, just got kind of mired in it. But anyway, the process we had followed was every team member, and at that point we had quite a few on the team, interviewed 3 people from their respective groups. Let me step back a moment. We kind of misunderstood the network map. We used the network map to populate our team, so we have people from all the constituent groups that we felt on our team. And so that helped then as they went out and interviewed people from their constituent groups. we got at least 2 pages of data from everybody's comments back. And then there was a July 8th event at the YMCA to the community. We got a lot of data from that. People filled out cards. We incorporated that data in to our lists. And then there was another event towards the end of July. I think it was out at Rock Valley, or was it at Guilford? Was it Guilford? Neither Gina or I were able to go, but we had our team members that went, and so we got information from them. From that, we assigned our teams into the 4 groups: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, to take all of that data, to consolidate it, and then to prioritize it. And so we got that far with the SWOT. So now we're trying to decide, now what's next? What do we do with that SWOT to get to the gap analysis and move forward from there? And so we've gotten some pretty good feedback. Bob Gurl came and met with Jean and I the other day. That was very helpful. Talked with Karen Brown and one of the other people from your team, Lorraine. So they've been trying to help us with that. As far as the current state goes, we have had strategic plans presented to us from the Rockford Public Schools 205, Dan Weistman, who's in charge of the Rockford Public School District's strategic plan, is actually one of our team members, and he has been very good about coming and able to give us some data and that kind of thing as well. Boylan High School came and presented because we wanted somebody from the private sector, and that actually she presented the Rockford Diocese strategic plan. So you see the private school in that realm. Don Gillingham from Rockford Lutheran Schools presented, and that's also from pre-K through 12 presentation. So we saw another piece there. We did have a presentation from the Rockford Regional Office. Lori Finello is a member of our team, and she did a great job of consolidating from around, because we know that it's not just Rockford itself, because everybody tends to think of, okay, well, what we got to do is solve the Rockford Public Schools problem, but for Transform Rockford, it's the region. So Lori gave us a good view of what's out in the region as well. Alignment Rockford presented, Rock Valley College presented, and Rockford University is presenting this week. So we've been getting a pretty good sense of current state, what's going on. As far as best practices go, we had started to assign our team to 4 different groups there. There is a lot of data out there. I'll have to be honest with you, we've just barely begun to do that part of it, to look into it. We lost our analyst. We're trying to replace our analyst to help us with some of that data. It was kind of easy for us because the impact statement already divided this education into, we actually subdivide into 5 components: pre-K, elementary, secondary, associate, and higher education, and then a 5th one that we're using the term accessible pathway. Accessible path, that's within the impact statement, for all of those folks that have fallen off the pathway. So that's where your initiatives in GED and some of the other things, Literacy Council and some of those things would come in. We may be realigning these based on some of the most recent things we've heard from. I'll just give you a little example. I did go to the NAS presentation last week, North Side Achievement Zone that they have up in Minneapolis. That was fabulous. And then also reading what was in Transform Rockford this weekend. What did they call that? The purpose-built communities. Also fascinating, because what was stumping us was that the 5 top things on our weakness list really had nothing to do with education. They were all of these things surrounding that NAS was dealing with and these purpose-built communities were dealing with. That was an aha moment for me. And so we'll talk with the rest of our team about that. There's a lot more that goes into education, which is why I think, like Catherine was saying, and saying things overlap so much. So more to come on all of that. The obstacles, our main one is the same thing. Everybody's identified as maintaining stability of the team. We had elements that we had identified that everybody was there. It was diverse. We had all of our network people in, and one by one, people dropped and added, and and as we said, including us, we've had 3 funerals and 2 weddings in 1 month, just between us 2 leaders, close. So that was difficult to get over to deal with all that in addition to doing all this volunteer work. So anyway, I guess our other biggest obstacle is we have done the tasks, but we are having a problem connecting them to the output work. How do you get from the SWOT analysis to the gaps and the rest of it? That's what's been our difficulty, and that's why I said doing this, as Catherine kind of identified, doing the backward mapping. That kind of clicked with Jean and I this week, and so we'll try and take that approach to move our team forward. I don't think there's one way to do it, but that I think kind of made sense to us.
How we doing, everybody? George Lamro with the Quality Spoke, and we have Edgar Cita here as well. I think that's about it from our group. Hopefully they're all working hard, right? Oh, I see Dan back there from our segment group. Early on, we struggled a lot. I mean, being the Quality Spoke, we couldn't find our direction. We felt, I think we all struggled to some extent that, okay, education, boom, cut and dry. Safety, cut and dry. Quality, what do we do with it? We reached out to our segment leads and to Mike and some others, and I think we finally started to gel and get some direction. And we finally realized our purpose is not so much one certain area, but to be like the overarching group that helps to make sure that all segments, that we're doing everything maybe the same way, looking for sustainability, etc. So once we figured that out, and that did take a good month and a half, we tried to figure out how do we go about doing this. So we actually went out individually and canvassed mainly the internet to try and find out what are best practices, what are metrics that are out there that other people are using, something that's not this person's or that person's, but something that's more universal, more global. We actually had a very aha moment. A couple of us actually found it the same day on a Saturday night. Yeah, we're boring people. But we actually found a standard that we'll talk about in a few minutes that is actually global. But before we talk about that, the other thing we looked at doing is what else can we do? And our biggest fear was we're going to overlap all the other spokes by trying to look at data that's more related to education or data that's more related to safety, etc. So we looked at it and said, what else can we do? So we actually decided to look for some of the areas in the community that we felt were not being addressed yet. So we've actually went out, divided the group up, and we have reached out to all the aldermen. We've actually sat with each of them or spoke over the phone, and we asked them some key questions. One would be, what has your interface been as an alderman with Transform Rockford? Once we got through that question, the next one was, within your ward, what are some of the things you need, or some of the hot topics in your ward? And they're different, depending on which ward, which alderman you talk to. And then the third question was trying to put those together by saying, okay, how can Transform Rockford, in their opinion, help your ward achieve some of those goals? And then the fourth question would be, are there any members in your community that would actually want to be part of Transform Rockford? Because we felt it at the time that we weren't getting to what I call the core of the community. The people that can't come to the meeting like this, the people that can't make it or trying to get across town would be very difficult. So I can spend an hour up here talking about what the alderman said, but more importantly, while we were doing that, we had Edgar Cita on special assignment, and we actually uncovered, and Edgar did a lot of good work behind the scenes with a standard we found for cities. It's an ISO standard. A lot of us that are in the business world have heard of ISO standards. This is actually a standard for cities, hopefully communities and regions, as we dig deeper. But with that, we were able to reach out to the originators of the ISO standard. We purchased it. We did a lot of behind-the-scenes work, and then we finally presented it to Mike and others.
Sometimes less is more, but sometimes more is more. And I think that's one of the things we've discovered. your theme of how do you get people engaged. In our committees, we were down to 2 and 3 people, and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm a bit of a communications philosopher. You know, I remember as a kid watching a movie that Paul Newman was in called Cool Hand Luke. You know, and kind of the thematic of that meeting was, you know, what we have here is a failure to communicate. And everybody communicates all the time in a number of ways, and in my opinion, everything communicates. So the way you're all sitting in this room communicates to me. The empty chairs in the front, there's a communications message here. So there's a number of things like that and that we've dealt with. So what we decided to do is, after living the brand and communications split, we brought our groups back together because we think there's a lot of thematics that are important to keep things moving along. We've got some of the same similar types of things, you know, what's the overlap, what isn't. And how I viewed the communications piece is it's really running on 2 tracks. There's sort of the global, how would a top 25 community communicate in 2025? I mean, how does it do that? And we have to recognize in the community, there's always going to be a divergence of opinions on what we ought to do and not do. And so to say, well, we're going to speak with one voice as a community, to me is a little difficult to do. But on the other hand, how we communicate and how we bring groups together and how do you engage and how do you do things, I think is a notable task. Then there's always the what. What are we going to communicate? And by the way, I'm an Iowa grad to boot. So, yeah, I wear it a little more subtly, though, with the black and gold. What are we going to communicate? And you do that in terms of, that's what our committee kind of got, like, well, what are we going to say and how are we going to do it? Well, where's this? And I think the challenge is on the what as well as the how. And so one of the things we felt like, and there was a tremendous quote in the paper, I thought, from Tom McNamara over the weekend about safety. And it said, you know, 5 years ago, if someone broke into a car, maybe 3 people in the neighborhood knew about it and the family. And 15 minutes later now, 400 people know about it. And we've got all the, well, yeah, buts, and well, of course, or what, and all the things we are dealing with. So the communications and all that has changed so great. But what we've really got to do, and what we want to really focus on as this dual spoke, is really getting down into our network. I mean, really. You know, I look around the group, and it's kind of the same. You represent the same kind of groups that have been coming to the committees for the last 15, 20 years, and it is really hard. We have deliberately tried to reach out and get this bigger network, and to me, that's the real challenge we have as a group and as a committee. But Jessica's got much of that all ironed out. No pun intended on her name, Jessica Iron. So, Jessica.
So, as Tom said, we've been working together with the communications spoke. We've had 2 meetings now. We have another one coming up in a couple of weeks. And we really have been focused on our network map and identifying kind of different sections, let's say, within the community or that map that we want to hit. So schools, local businesses, social media is going to be a big one for us, I think, because like Tom said, now 400 people know within 15 minutes instead of just a few. And so we struggle, I think, especially with living the brand, we struggle greatly because we feel like many of you have said, the spokes all lead into the brand. So you can't have a good brand, you can't have a great brand if your safety isn't there. You can't have a great brand if your education isn't there. So our thought has been, our brand right now does have some positives, so let's make sure we're sharing those positive stories. And so by sharing those positive stories, that's this idea of someone living the brand. So as part of our network map, we've been keeping that in mind. So as we start to reach out, who would be those storytellers, if you will, in each of these different areas of the community? I don't know if you guys know about that restaurant, the Scandinavian. The woman downtown, Emily Hurd, she raised money through a Kickstarter campaign and was able to save her restaurant and get it, and is going to move forward with construction. And Mike pointed out that's a great story of Rockford coming together as a community. So how do we share more of those kinds of stories? And so I reached out to Emily, and she's on board to help us. And so these are the types of connections we're trying to make. I've reached out a little bit to Rochelle EDC, what some of the things they've been doing, their Chamber of Commerce and their rebranding. I reached out to a former employee of the EDC of Rockford who now works for the state, who's rebranding the state. And so we're trying to align with her to make sure that as we begin to rebrand Rockford as a region, how does that align with the rebranding of the state? And so there's sort of two sides to it. There's the grassroots nitty-gritty stories, and then there's the higher level kind of government. But I think one thing that I think would be very helpful, and I don't know, maybe I'm alone on this, is that if we had one massive network map as a database, as an Excel spreadsheet, and you could have it and you could have it so that you had the person, the entity they work for, maybe their area of impact, if it's local businesses, social media, whatever, who the Transform Rockford contact is, and then you could sort, organize, whatever, and then I could say, oh, Tom knows somebody in XYZ organization, I'm going to ask Tom to introduce me. Or you see someone else on a different Transform Rockford spoke, and they can introduce you to someone, hopefully shortening that path and enabling us to expand our network map that much quicker.
One of the things that, as I listen to everyone else, we really have, as we look at it, when we look at the region, we look at being very broad. So we're looking at our network map that we create, and we spend a lot of time doing that. And I just counted up, and it's just shy of 200 different organizations that we think are involved in community planning. And so we're going out, it's not just the city of Rockford. You got the counties, you got school districts, you've got different road commissions, things. You've got, when you're looking at counties, we're going in multiple counties, because from a regional view, depending on what you're planning for, it can really be pretty broad. So there's about 200 on our list. And we really felt that, you couldn't really leave anybody out. You don't want to leave a Stillman Valley out, because they're part of the region. But how do you effectively reach them? So we we started scoring them in terms of importance. Ones were the ones we absolutely need to, but we need to reach out to every single one, we thought. And so for some of the lower priorities, I'd say there's about 20 ones that we want to make sure 100% we're going to make sure we're getting their feedback one-to-one. The other groups, we're going to invite them and do more groups, and thinking that, okay, if they show up, hopefully we'll have a good percentage of those others to show up to in an event as we talk about different strategies. And then, we're not going to reach 100%. We know there'll be some no-shows, but at least by doing that, we'll get feedback from all those different planning organizations. So that was real key of what we were doing. The other thing I'd say that we're doing right now is actually, rather than doing everything sequentially, doing all the studies and all that, do things more in parallel. So we're creating the strategies ourselves. When you look at our impact statement, it's all about planning for growth and renewal. But more importantly, there's 3 key words in it. It's purposeful, transparent, and results-oriented. So we've dived down into those 3 words. What do each of those 3 phrases mean for us? Because we're all about the planning side, not necessarily about the the results that you're after from the education results or infrastructure results, etc. But how do you go about it? It's got to be purposeful, results oriented, and transparent. And that gives you a lot of guidance in terms of making sure we're looking at the right scope and that we're developing strategies to achieve each of those. We'll have the same problem as everyone else, because you come up with a lot more strategies, and then you want to introduce community-wide. So then you got to draw a line, what's strategy, what's too tactical. And we might be able to talk about some of those tactics as examples, but we want to really focus on the key core strategies. So that's where we're at right now. September, I'll be honest, wasn't a great month for our meetings. I think part of it, people were attending. What we've tried to do, we got a small group, and we tried to make it where, set our meeting dates when we can make sure the vast majority are attending. Our next meeting is tomorrow night, so hopefully we're going to, be able to catch up. But we are using Google pretty well in terms of having people place strategies out in Google, and then in our, when we get together, it's really discussing those and going forward. So we've continued to make progress. Again, September, if you looked at our status report, where we were green, we're moving toward yellow a little bit, but still, as we look out ahead of where we want to be on December 2nd, and with some goals, I think we can get back where we need to be. I think that's some of the key. Some of the challenge, one of the challenges I'll mention is when you have community events, you get people lined up to give feedback on a lot of these different spokes planning. You don't get that kind of feedback. You don't get anybody really showing up because there's not that passion. People are passionate about education, infrastructure, and things like that. Planning, they're not. So that's one of our strategies, one of our challenges we have.
I think we see one of our final outcomes is putting together what we think are really solid models that have been used consistently in other communities that have led to good planning culture, good cohesive collaboration in the community as a whole, to come to conclusions and come to effective decisions for our community. And I think that's kind of where we're focused. Barry mentioned our network map, and it is huge. And you look at the components of it; it's almost all government agencies, either with elected officials leading them or appointing those who do lead them. And so when you get into the topics of effective planning and the models we bring about, it certainly will be a sensitive discussion with a number of those groups and getting their feedback. But we do need that feedback because they are the drivers of what happens in our community in terms of where the funds go, where laws are passed, where policies are put into place to establish the direction and growth in different parts of the community. So that's going to be a big challenge for us. And as Barry mentioned, with our community input sessions, to have an open invitation is probably not going to work for us. We're going to really have to target people to come and really have some good bounce back and good feedback. I think the strength of our group is we have people who are engaged in community development already and have some background with that, or people who have some good philosophies with a group that, even though we're a small group, we work very well together. We have used Google quite often. We work with a lot of homework assignments, so we do meet and try to achieve consensus in our meetings, but then we also have things going back out either for a real-time document that keeps changing and updating itself, or for areas that we all divide and conquer and focus on some areas to bring back and share with the rest of the group as well.
Yeah, as we go through the strategies, the other thing we're starting to create is basically a road show that when we meet with the other groups, we have a presentation that, whether you call it a road show or whatever, that we have something that we can present to get that feedback from. So that we have initial drafts of at this point as well.
I think for us, because planning for us is the big P, we probably are overlapping in many people's areas that we need to be mindful of that and share our thoughts across all the groups. But when listening to quality talk, it sounds like we probably need to talk sooner rather than others. There's a real link to what you're talking about and what we're talking about as well.